Hi there everyone, Lars here with another Owl House review and analysis brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and once again I come to you with what I hope to be a good, concise video looking at the episodes of the Owl House as they come out. In this case, we are going to be looking at Elsewhere and Elsewhen. This episode, whoo boy, spoilers ahead. If you haven't yet watched it, take some time, watch this episode. It is pretty awesome. Now, let's get into it. This episode, I'm going to admit, was very wonky. Something in the pacing just seemed off. Some of the scenes felt like they were just kind of rushed. Things felt kind of cobbled together, and certain motivations just weren't quite there where they probably should have been. But overall, I did like this. It's proof that even if an episode isn't perfect, that it can still be very much enjoyable. And this is one that I really got into. One of the things that I really got into with this was the show's take on time travel. For one thing, I love that time travel is just kind of this natural, crazy occurrence on the Boiling Isles. It just works for this crazy world, and it makes sense that with all of the things that the magic can do within the Owl House series, that this is something that could happen. And yet again, this comes back to my analysis of magic in general, is that if you know enough about the glyphs, you can, in theory, travel through time, or basically do just about anything else. But it's highly complicated. And we get hints of that here in this episode. So yes, I got that one right. Now then, one thing I really liked about this episode is how they poked fun at plot holes, and the plot holes that time travel creates. And it's so true. The moment that you decide to use time travel in a story, you open up such a can of worms. There's so many daunting questions, and it's so easy to have answers that are ultimately insufficient. So what I really like about how the Owl House approaches time travel is that effectively anything that you do within time travel doesn't necessarily create a paradox, at least not that we were yet able to see, but rather that you become a part of the flow of time naturally. It's not a matter of, well, what if it didn't happen? Well, it did happen. And we get to see that especially with how Lilith ends up tripping on her own head, and how Lilith and Luz become an integral part of Belos's adventure. So let's talk about Belos right here. It has been confirmed Philip Wittenbane is Belos. That was something that some people had definitely called. I personally wondered if it might be his brother. Turns out it wasn't his brother. This right here, wow. This is awesome. We've learned so much about Philip Wittenbane / Belos here in this episode. We've learned that he is incredibly manipulative and misleading. I love that the guy is basically writing fan fiction about himself in his own journal. That is just awesome. It kind of reminds me of a character that I played in one D&D game where my character wrote fan fictions about himself because he was an old man way past his prime on this adventure, and he just kind of wanted to make himself sound really cool. That's basically what Belos is doing here, except only that Belos is trying to make himself seem like ultimately the good guy when really he isn't. And this kind of makes sense because, well, this guy is from crazy Puritan Massachusetts. If you know the history of what those guys did, holy cow, it is insane, and especially when it comes to magic. The history of the Puritans and magic is an insane one because they didn't necessarily eschew or avoid magic. Rather, if they crossed it, they would use magic to destroy magic. And this tells us a little bit about then who Belos really is, why he'd be willing to do all of these crazy experiments and things. Something is motivating him, not just to get revenge on these witches and to destroy this world, but I still believe that he's very much connected to the Titan in some kind of way, and that what he intends to do is restore the Titan and basically steal everyone's magic in the process. And on that note, we get some amazing confirmation about magic. Pretty much now we understand why Belos has to rely on artificial magic. He has no bile sac because he's human. His body is warped because of the magic that he has used on himself, using the glyphs that Luz has been discovering. And he himself has discovered all different kinds of things that can be done with glyphs. Holy cow! Like, now that what we've learned now with how you can create these complicated weaves of magic by not just simply putting the glyphs into order, spelling out what you want, but you can create fantastic nuance by creating circles with the glyphs all intersecting. Holy cow, this guy is brilliant. And on top of that, he's horrifying because he's carved these things into himself to grant himself all these kinds of amazing magical powers. And now we better understand what's going on here. This guy's basically cursed himself. He's corrupted himself through the magic that he's used. There's other things that we still don't fully understand about what happened to Philip Wittenbane, but we can begin piecing things together. And this comes back to something that I had theorized about way earlier on, that artificial magic is basically stolen magic. It now makes sense because he uses a staff, he uses magic that doesn't seem to be quite right. How does he do the petrification process? Bellows has been stealing magic to enhance his own powers. Why? Because the more that he uses the glyphs that he's carved into himself, the more he corrupts and destroys himself. So he needs a way to use magic without having that magic blow back on him. And this makes Bellows a fantastically strong villain to go up against because he's extremely resourceful, very brilliant, and he has access basically to all kinds of magic at this point. Holy cow, I am looking forward to the showdown with Bellows. Now then, one thing that I've seen a lot of people already highlighting is Wittenbane's perchance to sacrifice people. And people are like, oh no, Hunter's going to be sacrificed. That could happen. However, we're still not yet entirely certain of what Bellows is actually after. This is something that is very key to understand right here. We only are getting a glimpse of what Philip Wittenbane / Bellows has really planned. We understand that he needs contact with the Collector, and we already see that there was some sort of plan in motion way early on. When we go to his lair, I'm pretty certain that that is the foundation of his castle. Look at the piping. There's something going on here. Once again, we don't fully understand it. But now we can better guess at who Hunter is. I'm more confident than ever before that Hunter is not a clone, but that Hunter is actually his great-great-nephew or something like that, because his brother was already here on this world. Hunter does not have a bile sac allowing him to use magic, probably because of his human heritage. And yeah, that seems to all check out. That makes really great sense, and that makes the relationship between Hunter and Bellows all the more tragic because this is family, and Hunter is very obviously being manipulated and abused by Bellows, while Bellows is just putting on this nice guy act that he's been using for centuries to hurt people. So bringing it all together, what we see right here with Philip Wittenbane / Bellows, this is a fantastically put together villain. And I love that we still don't fully understand him. This is a great way of introducing a villain, understanding their personality, a little bit of their goals, what kind of dangers they pose, but without giving everything away, so that way there's still more mysteries and more twists later on down the road that will excite and entice us. We don't fully understand the villain right now, which means that their plans are still an enigma, and so it leaves the heroes on the back foot. It keeps the stakes high and allows them to be raised even more simply because we don't fully have all the information just yet. This is brilliant pacing for a villain. Where the pacing gets really wonky, however, is in the adventure that Luz and Lilith have. I actually really like this. I wish that we had just gotten the full episode of this alone without any sort of B-plot, because things felt rushed, especially Lilith's reasoning for joining Luz on this adventure. True, Lilith is a bit of a daredevil and an adventurer, but this whole thing about her being a historian and working at the museum and all this stuff, I actually want to know more about that. But all we get are just little goofy references and a silent jab, or veiled jab really, at Indiana Jones, and that's about it. And without understanding any of that, it just seems like we're getting thrown into an adventure that Lilith is okay with going on, but we don't fully understand why she is doing it. It's just kind of played up more for laughs than anything reasonable, and really it's more Luz's adventure. Now, I do like that Luz and Lilith are forming a much, much tighter bond, and that they genuinely care about each other. This is a fantastic transformation from where they were at the end of Season 1 to where they are now in the middle of Season 2. I really, really like that we're here at this point. Once again, the character development is just, it's on point. But where the character development in this episode was not on point was the relationship with Ida's father. Let me just say that the scene where Ida and her father get the chance to finally chat was, though, well done. The conversation that they have, that was beautiful. That we get the realization that she's already been forgiven by her father for mauling him and destroying his life. He's forgiven her long ago, and she just hasn't forgiven herself. And that was really, really well done. I love just the amount of care that emanated from him, the love that emanated from him, and that he shared a palistrom seed with her. There is so much going on here in just this one scene. The redemption, the forgiveness, the inability to forgive oneself, the hurt, the healing, the chance for a better life moving forward, the palistrom seed. There's so much going on in this scene, and I would have loved to have more time with it. Because the scene was rushed, it didn't hit the way that it was supposed to, and I really, really hope that we're going to get more of this down the road. I'm sorry, but for an episode that really did a lot of things very well, especially with Bellows, this needed true concentration. That's why I say that I wish that the time travel had been in really its own thing, and that this adventure with Ida had been the core of another episode. I understand that the Owl House has very limited time, and that is something that authors don't really have to deal with. It's something that's a constraint for shows and movies. But this is definitely a moment where I feel this should have been given precedence within an episode, because it needed to land hard. There needs to be greater explanation. There does need to be that, because there's so much that's left unsaid. And granted, yeah, there's other episodes in the future where maybe we can say more about what happened here on the cliff. But the moment has passed. The emotional weight is going to shift and move away. And that's something that's so hard to get back. So overall, within this episode, Elsewhere and Elsewhen, we get fantastic world building. We get great character development for the relationship between Luz and Lilith. We get fantastic character development for Bellows. And we learn a lot about Ida's life with her father. We learn that she's been forgiven, but that she can't forgive herself. This will be an important thing for her to overcome going forward. And in general, what can we learn from this as novice authors? Well, pacing. I know I did a rant about this, about how hard it is, and this is definitely an instance where we can see how hard pacing can be, even when you have brilliant ideas. Sometimes you got to go back and maybe you have to rearrange some things. Maybe you've got to really kind of swallow a bitter pill and shift something to where you didn't think you were originally going to put it. And when the emotional moment has passed, it has passed, and it's very, very hard to reclaim that later on within the story. So, hence the dangers, once again, of having bad pacing within your book. So, that's all I'm going to say about this episode right here. There's plenty more to say. I want to hear what your thoughts are, though, on Elsewhere and Elsewhen. Please put them down in the comment section below. I'll be reading through all of them, and I'll have conversations with you guys there. And if there's anything else that you would like to hear about the Owl House or about any other story, please let us know about that as well. We would love to hear from you. If you're looking for more writing advice or more writer's insights, please check out our other videos here on the YouTube channel. Also check out our podcast episodes found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We also have writing exercises for you over at our Pinterest page, and we would love for you to become part of our writing community. Links for all of those sites and more are in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, keep on fearing whatever the heck Bellows is planning, and tschüss.